Welcome to the Win Webinars. This next episode in the series is sponsored by Heffernan Insurance Brokers. Thank you very much to them. It's focused on beating the insurance crisis. And we have a team here from Heffernan Insurance, Liz Bishop and Debra Costa from their wine team. And we also have Stuart Bockman, the general manager from Peter Michael Winery, as well as Adam Iveson from Ember Defense. This episode will have roughly 4 parts. One focus on the insurance market and why it's in crisis. Then we'll look a little bit at the technology behind what's driving the underwriting process. And then we'll have a case study where Stuart will talk in depth about how they managed to reduce their risk and get insurance coverage despite being in one of the highest risk zones possible for wildfires. And lastly, Adam will talk about how you can harden your winery and how they helped Peter Michael Winery as well. First, a little bit of housekeeping on how this process goes. This webinar is pre-recorded, but all the speakers are present in the live chat. So if you have any questions along the way, you can just type them into the chat and the speakers can answer them in real time. So don't hold back. Ask your questions when you have them. First off, let's do a little introduction of each of the speakers. Liz, can we start with you?
Yes, absolutely. I'm Liz Bishop. I'm with Heffernan Insurance Brokers. I am an executive vice president here, and I help co-lead the wine practice with Debra Costa.
Excellent. Stuart?
Stuart Bockman with Peter Michael Winery. I'm the general manager here. We're in a very rural area. It's gorgeous. It looks like a national park, but we are surrounded by forest and trees and scrub and brush. So this is a big deal for us.
Excellent. Debra?
I'm Debra Costa, and I'm with Heffernan Insurance Brokers, Senior Vice President. I head up our vintner practice, and we insure well over 150 wineries, and we insure some very difficult properties, such as Peter Michael Winery.
Excellent. And Adam?
Hi, I'm Adam Iveson with Ember Defense. I'm one of the co-founders.
Thank you, Adam. So to begin with, Liz, can you tell us a little bit about Heffernan Insurance and the wine team over there?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Ken. So we've been in the wine space for quite a long time. I would say that Benzinger was our very first winery that we insured, and that was probably 25 years ago. And over that 25 years, we've leaned in heavily into the wine space. And as Deb said, we insure over 150 properties. And that has just been an incredible evolution. We were one of the first brokers that actually helped develop the stock throughput program that people are taking advantage of today. There was certainly a drop out of that market about 3 to 4 years ago, but that space is coming back. We really have leaned in very, very heavily on wildfire defense related to insurance, because we know that you guys really need to be on point for wildfire defense so that insurance can feel comfortable coming back. Our year-over-year fires have been challenging, and thank goodness we had that break last year. And we're going to knock wood that we have another break this year. And the more that everybody's on point with wildfire defense, that what's going to be talked about today, and we're just so excited about this case study, and Stuart specifically speaking to what they've done with their winery. The more that we're on point related to this, insurers will come back and bring capacity, and insurance will get more cost effective. So we're just, again, wanting to be on the sharpest point and bring these concepts to the wine industry, because we know how important your profit and loss statements are with the challenges of COVID, smoke taint, insurance just in general. So again, just wanting to help the industry as a whole.
Yeah, and I know that Debra is prepared to talk a little bit more in depth about what the insurance crisis really is about and what's driving it. Is that right, Debra?
Yeah. So what we understand that probably many of the people, or all of the people, in fact, viewing this session have had escalating costs of insurance. And really, the cost of insurance is just simply not sustainable. And so, as Liz explained, we're here because of the year-over-year wildfires. So wanted to speak to a little bit about what can be done, what are your peers doing, and I think most importantly, it's really important to partner with a broker that really understands the space and that lives this day in and day out, because that broker has to communicate with the marketplace and tell your story so that you can have the best possible options available. Also, what's happening, and again, probably many people have received non-renewals from their current partners. And so they're ending up at a much higher price point than they have in the past. And so we just wanted to share what some of your peers are doing. And some of your peers simply are looking at the price tag associated with the insurance, and they're throwing their hands up and they're saying, we're just not going to buy insurance. We're not going to be covered. They'll go to the FAIR plan and buy, the limits that are available through that resource. What we're finding and what we're really helping our clients do is identify a risk position or a coverage limit that's acceptable to them. And so I think that is, something that most properties are doing. And with that, we're finding that it takes anywhere from 7 to 12 insurers to provide the coverage levels, depending on the limit that is selected. And what many wineries are doing at this point is they're self-insuring or not purchasing some of those coverage layers so they can help drive down the costs. And then the third thing is stock throughput. Liz mentioned that the stock throughput market, Lloyd's of London, has come back. It has rebounded as of first quarter of last year. So if you do have the opportunity to insure your inventory and carve that out of the property program, then that is certainly the desired result.
So Liz, can you tell us a little bit about what the insurance market looks like from the macro level?
Absolutely. So I think everybody's getting a chance to take a look at this current marketplace slide, and really all we see are, unfortunately, a lot of plus numbers here. And the biggest number that is affecting most wineries is really in the property as well as the stock throughput section. And you can see that market rates are up here anywhere between 5 to 10%. And everybody has already gotten very big increases overall in their property insurance programs, whether it's just property and or stock throughput. And so to be stacking on another 5 to 10% is so very painful. To know that the marketplace is still trending upward, and that is being driven by reinsurers. Reinsurers are saying that, we feel that global warming is still very much in play here. And we know that wineries are doing more, which is good. And they love seeing that, and they want your story. And Deb's going to touch a little bit maybe more on that, about how important that story is. And Stuart is going to touch very much on their story and how their story combated a lot of the technology and mapping that insurers use. But with that said, most reinsurers are saying they still want that 10% and possibly plus rate. And they're also saying that they want smaller bites. They're saying, we don't really want to take 10 to 20, $30 million positions. They want to take 2.5 million, and they want to spread it out over several different risks so that they completely spread risk. Because most insurers are fairly heavily loaded and have concentration of risk really in St. Helena in particular, as well as Calistoga. There's just a lot of wineries that are there, and there's a lot of inventories at the wine warehouses in St. Helena and also in American Canyon and South Napa. So everybody is wanting to spread risk, take smaller bites, take a little more rate, but your insurance broker matters here. You really need a broker that's going to push back, tell your story so that you can, with them, effectively combat that push forward for rate. And you can see these other lines, well, they're trending upward. They're not the majority of your premium. So the biggest attack has to be on that property and stock throughput.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and these insurance rates, they're driven by an underlying software algorithm, right? That has models that assesses the risk. And I think, Debra, you've looked into those and can share a little bit about how those work, right?
Yeah, so technology is really driving the process, and every property right now is being risk modeled by one software program or another. Probably the one that most people are familiar with is CoreLogic, And that's what we're sharing with you today. And this is a snapshot, of course, of Peter Michael Winery, located in Calistoga. And they're the red dot in the middle of the red. And this modeling, and every model varies, but with CoreLogic, they run anywhere. The risk scores run from 1 being the best to 100 being the most adverse. And so again, we are challenged with this winery having the highest score of 100. And how the modeling works, it aggregates various data points, and what can be measured can be captured. And with CoreLogic, what's the primary drivers of this risk score of 100 is the proximity of this property to the past wildfires. And you can see that there have been many wildfires, the most recent being the Glass Fire, but the Kincaid Fire came, and it shows you that it, basically it was very close, within less than 200 feet to the property. And it tells you how many square feet were damaged in that particular wildfire. Then we had the Tubbs wildfire in 2017. And again, that wildfire was less than 2.5 miles to the Peter Michael Winery. And then the Glass Fire just being, shy of 5 miles. So that, and then the WUI, which is like a new term for us, but it's called the WUI, and it stands for the Wildland Urban Interface Score. And there's all kinds of maps, and it's showing you the brush load that is closest to the property. And Adam, you might want to chime in a little bit about WUI, share what you're seeing and how that's driving your business.
Sure. So one thing about it, like looking at this CoreLogic map, it shows that Peter Michael is in the red, and it's 100 out of 100. But what they're not showing is actually the work that Peter Michael has done that Stuart's going to go into that would bring that down significantly if we did put boots on the ground to actually do a physical score with a human. That's basically looking through satellite and historic data. So that's one thing I want to touch on, Deb. And then, yeah, the WUI, the Wildland Urban Interface, has been around. It's now based that we're moving out of the valleys into the forest areas and the wildland areas to build structures. And in building codes, there's so many around them, like Chapter 7A on how you construct a building within the WUI. So the WUI is very important to understand that, are you building in a WUI? Are you currently in a WUI? And what are the guidelines there? And then the brush load, again, going over the risk modeling, it can be altered. It's just, this is from satellite.
Yeah, thank you. So I would encourage everyone to really understand what risk modeling software is being used to analyze your particular property. Again, because it's measuring data points, it's primarily used for the underwriters so that they can look at this risk score and say 100 decline. And so our jobs are to turn that page and find our way to coverage. And we've been successful in doing that with the Peter Michael Winery. And so we want to turn that over to Stuart and then to Adam so they can share with you what they've done. So we've been able to share that with the marketplace to be able to bring them coverage that's meaningful and helps protect their assets.
And Deb, can I add something here too?
Of course.
Thank you. So I think another thing is CoreLogic's, while certainly, underwriters will adopt and commit to a certain technology, we'll call that, that says, all right, this is the modeling that we're going to use. And that is going to prejudice whoever that particular technology is. It's going to prejudice the underwriters based on that technology. And so what it's important to have is competing technologies that give maybe a better story so that we can go to the underwriters and say, you know what, CoreLogic might be saying it's 100 out of 100, which is what Peter Michael's score is, which is on a scale of 1 to 100. 100 is the most challenged property in CoreLogic's model. Okay, so it's mapping out as most extreme. And so what we'll do as a brokerage firm, frankly, is we will go and we will get competing softwares that will give different modeling, which will pick up more data around, how has the clearance happened, right? We might even give things like, a drone coverage that's very specific to the property that shows clearance and things like that. And Stuart will talk a little bit about that. But those are the types of things that underwriters need to see. They need to get underneath the canopy, because that's what this software kind of shows, is really, what does the canopy say? And that's not the whole story. It really is about getting underneath the canopy, what's going on, what's proximity of distance and clearance and things like that. And so I think that's a good transition for us to ask some specific questions to the star of our show, which is Stuart Bockman of Peter Michael Winery. He is an ex-CFO for Peter Michael, but is now acting as general manager over the whole operation. So, Stuart, I'm going to start asking you some questions now. You can see that you do map at the 100 out of 100. Literally, probably 60 days ago, the score was 97 out of 100. So it will show you that this modeling will progress and does change kind of on a semi-monthly basis. And it can go up or it can go down. So given that you're 100 out of 100 now, could you tell us about the incremental steps that you took as a winery in protecting your overall property from wildfire?
Sure. If you take a look at this map, our property runs from highway, which is the Highway 128, which is the line that's coming across, all the way up to about 2,000 feet up the slope of Mount St. Helena. So it's very rugged, very natural area. And if you look at this map, you can see there is no safe side. Fire could hit our property from absolutely any direction. In 2017, the Tubbs Lane fire started a little bit further south of our property. And the only damage we had to deal with personally from that is the telephone poles between Calistoga and us burnt. That means we had no phone lines and no internet for 3 months. And while that was annoying, it was not devastating to the business. But it certainly did get our attention. We look around at our property, and because it's all estate-grown fruit, we cannot afford to miss a vintage. We can't have our inventory destroyed. We can't have our crops destroyed. If we lose one vintage, we're just out of the market for that entire vintage. We can't go get the same quality of fruit somewhere else. So we decided, right after 2017, we really weren't that interested in insurance. It's nice to have, but we were interested in making sure we didn't lose anything on our property. We have never lost a single building. We've never lost a single vine to fire. We have installed roof sprinklers on every single building we have. We've gotten ourselves a thermogel system, which is a gel-like goo that you can spray on buildings to help protect them. We've always been blessed with water, but one of the real keys is we took our upper reservoir, which is maybe half a mile, 3/4 of a mile away from the winery, and we ran a pipe from that reservoir, which has some 40 acre-feet, down to the winery. So all along that distance, there's fire hydrants and they're rainbirds. And every one of our buildings now has rainbirds running around the perimeter, so we can spray not only the edge of the building, but soak the ground around each building to try to stop embers or anything from starting a fire right next to the building.
Mm-hmm.
After a few years of this, I'd say back in 2017, we probably spent $125,000 in that 1 year to limb up trees, remove brush, and to remove some trees. We're now up to the point that we're spending $250,000 per year for that, and it is ongoing. This is something we have to do every single year. It sounds like a lot of money, but when you look at what the price of insurance has done, we can earn that back so fast, it's ridiculous. It truly is. So after a few years of our clearing, doing everything else, we brought in Ember Defense and asked them, all right, what more can we do? And they have gone through our building and put in vents in the attic, as well as gutter guards to again, try to stop the idea of an ember moving through the air and starting something on fire. This shows the rain birds. The middle picture has the rain birds that surround each building. And then the fire hydrants are on the left and the roof sprinklers on the right. When we think about it, 40 some acre feet, that's enough water to run around the clock for a couple of weeks. So, we're blessed with water, but we had to spend the money to make sure the water could get to where the risk is for the fire. We have some outbuildings that are used for hospitality, and we would hate to lose them, but losing those does not threaten the business. Either losing inventory or losing the winery and the ability to make wine is really what would threaten the business. So, we've had many insurance companies actually come on the property because Liz and Deb have brought them to look around and see what's on the ground. And we told them flat out, we never want your money. We're going to spend as much as we can to make sure we don't lose anything in the fire, because it doesn't do us any good to get paid after the fact and have no wine to sell. So we've really taken kind of a different approach to it, in that we're more interested in hardening the property, and we're not interested in having insurance coverage. We have it because it's not prudent not to, but that's not our first line of defense. It really isn't.
Very good. How did your process go when you changed brokers, Stuart? How did that process go? Was it, so you changed kind of, I think it was last year, technically, and in the midst of all this crisis. So are you glad you did it? Did it go better? Did it go worse? How'd it go?
Oh, it went far better. It used to be pretty straightforward. Our broker would bring us a winery package that included everything: inventory, buildings, liability, all together. One carrier, one package. I think if I go back to before 2017, maybe spent $400,000 for everything. Well, in our most recent renewals, it's been $1.5 million for just property and inventory coverage. So we can certainly afford to take some self-insurance, take some risk ourselves, and put some of that money into hardening the property. I mean, when rates go up that high, it seemed crazy not to do everything we can possibly do to protect the property. This year, we've got, we keep doing incremental things every year. This year, we're taking some of the wood fences that we have around our generators. We're going to replace them with rock or brick. We've got Ember Defense has a new program that we signed on to called Rapid Response. They've got some thermal gel's a little bit dated. They've got some new fire retardants they can use. They've got the equipment if we have to call them out in the event of a fire. So it feels like we've done a lot, and I know we've spent a lot of money, but we're not done. We're going to keep doing this every year and keep looking for ways to make it incrementally safer. But changing brokers was really critical for two reasons. As I think Liz mentioned, we had to buy everything in layers. The days of one package are long gone. So it was working with a lot of different companies to get each layer at a time. But the other thing that was critical to us was get the information early enough so we'd have time to evaluate it and make a decision. We couldn't have a package being brought to us and say, all right, you have 10 minutes to take it or leave it, write a check. We just had that time to evaluate ourselves, go to the board, explain to them why we're spending the kind of money we're spending, and really be able to look at everything. So for us, switching brokers just was really beneficial with the entire process. And the fact that we also had other people to tell our story. The brokers are out there pitching our story, showing pictures, bringing them to the winery so that Liz and Deb and I can walk around and actually show them all the trees that have been limbed up. It's the kind of thing until you're on the ground, I don't think you realize how much has been done over the years here.
Yeah, well said, Stuart. Thank you very much. I'm sure you'll get a bunch of questions all throughout this session. So well done. Very good case study on what you guys are doing. All right. And you mentioned that you have brought Ember in, not just for this rapid response, but that's a really interesting program that we can certainly talk a little bit further about. But before we jump into that, Deb, I know you wanted to kind of walk through some questions with with Ember and with Adam in particular on their process.
Thanks, Liz. So Adam, when you're out to a property, let's say a property that has not done the work initially that Stuart has done at his property, what's the first step? How do you get started?
It's a good question, Deb. So the first step is actually scheduling an evaluation so we can actually get on site and review and walk the property. So we were talking about how CoreLogic does it digitally. We like doing it boots on the ground. We want to come in, we want to start with each structure and work our way out into the zones. So for example, there's several zones for defensible space. You got 0 to 5 feet out from the structure wall. Then you got 5 to 30 feet. And then you got 30 to 100 feet. And in winery cases, they can go out into hundreds of feet. Most importantly, you start with the structure. So we look at each individual structure and we start with the roof down. So when we look at a structure, you want to make sure it has a Class A roof, and you want to make sure gutter guards are put on, or at least gutters have a program to be cleaned, because you can clean gutters. It's just if they don't get cleaned, that's the problem. So you figure a gutter gets half full of debris and an ember gets in there, it's probably enough to light the fascia and go under the roof sheathing. So that's why we just put an all metal gutter guard on, a one and done solution, and be done with it. So you don't have to have that annual inspection and cleaning. We look at vents, which are very important. Stuart touched on that, but we use a product called Vulcan vents. And there's two parts to a Vulcan vent. The first part is it actually blocks embers with a fine mesh screen, which is like a 14 screen. Imagine like a 1/16 of an inch metal screen. And then it has a honeycomb matrix that swells shut that when it hits about 400, 450 degrees. Now, that being said, we don't want the vents to swell shut. That is something that if we do our job correctly, or if like Stuart has done correctly, get the heat away from the buildings. That's very, very critical. But the vent can do that if it had to. And then we look at, like what Stuart said, the sprinklers on the roof. You want to put sprinklers on a building and go around a building for several reasons. One, you want to raise the relative humidity, and you want to lower the ambient temperature. And then you want to stop all embers from igniting any vegetation that's left around the structures. So ideally in a winery setting, you're going to still have vegetation that's very pretty and it's next to the buildings. And that's part of the appeal of going to visiting the winery. We don't want to lose that. So we have to protect that. And that's just a great resource to do that. And then we look at things like long-term fire retardant. And that's one that you go right into and you can spray ahead of the season. So it lasts up to roughly like 2 inches of rainfall, but significant rainfall. And it lasts all season. And it's just applied once a season. So until it rains and it washes away, and then you do it every year. And then lastly, I know we touched, and I'll go back through all these questions, but rapid response. And that's something where it's new and we're trying to help our clients even further. So in the event of a wildfire, this is where a client would give us a call and the fire's, within 5-10 miles, it's uncomfortable. We want to come ahead of evacuations. We're going to send a trained fire crew out with these trucks, and they're going to be fully loaded with Phos-Chek Fortify, and they get on property, they button up the property, they make sure all the windows are closed, skylights are closed, doors are closed. You're going to want to make sure night air is off in the winery situation. We want to make sure the staff is prepared, everyone's safe, because a lot of the staff is now trained in a lot of these wineries to where they're prepared for wildfire season. So we want to make sure they have all their PPE gear, so their personal protection equipment. And we want to make sure the staff that does get evacuated. We basically coat everything that is a risk right there with the fire retardant, and then we evacuate ourselves unless it's a situation where we have to help out the fire department or something comes up. But most of the time we're going to be leaving with the staff. So life first. And Stuart touched on one thing there that I definitely want to touch on is looking at a winery. There's many buildings normally. Sometimes there can be 15, 20 buildings. Well, you can't protect all of them in some cases. If the fire is coming and it's coming fast, and let's say the wind is happening at 70 miles an hour, embers are 2 miles ahead of the flame front, it's going to happen really, really quick. So we have to be really targeted on what is the number one thing to protect. So in Peter Michael's case, he mentioned inventory. Like that would be the first stop for us, is the inventory. We'd want to make sure that is 100% ready to go, and then work our way out to other structures. So, and wineries are probably all going to pick inventory and then work their way out. But some people, give you an example, like a homeowner would start with the main house, then a guest house. So, because you may not have time, this happens fast. Ember Defense was constructed to help property owners survive a wildfire. And long story short, me and Devin, we started Ember Defense in 2017, and we saw such a need to actually help property owners understand from the structure protection side to the defensible space side, because before it was just defensible space, Smokey the Bear, defensible space, get your 100 feet. Well, there's another 50% of the equations, the structures, and that's pretty recent years that they've talked about it. And in that, we've really dove in and figured out the thousands of hours trying to figure out what products to offer these property owners and homeowners and business owners to protect their structures. And one was a Vulcan vent. There's 3 major vent manufacturers on the market, but we chose Vulcan because of the airflow. So when your vent is not in use, it actually needs to breathe. Well, Vulcan has the least amount of reduction out of all 3 of the major brands, and they all 3 work for fire, but airflow is really critical when you're retrofitting a structure. Gutter guards, we went through 42 different companies, and we figured out that Valor Gutter Guards was the premium gutter guard for us, made here in California, next to Vulcan vents. And we chose them, the stainless steel construction on the actual screen, and then the all metal coated system that's actually all metal and framed. So, and then the platypus sprinkler system we brought in from Australia, and that was something that was built up over the years of using several different sprinkler systems, but it's fully autonomous. And we chose FosCheck Fortify, which mostly Fortify, not just FosCheck, but Fortify is the product we use. FosCheck makes many products, but Fortify was the eco-friendly choice for us. Yeah, that's the whole history behind Ember Defense and how we built this over the years and met with all these great partners. And like Heffernan was a wonderful partner. They actually told a story, meeting with insurance companies and brokers alike, and they don't tell a story. So we wanted someone that actually go tell a story for the property owner.
Yeah, all very well said. Very interesting. And I think this program is going to have high adoption. So I'm very excited to be able to roll that out. All right, I think that concludes overall our session. Kim, I'm sure you're going to try to wrap us up, but right as we wrap up, I'm thinking that just so many wonderful insights today from, certainly, thank you, our star of the show, Stuart Bockman, from Peter Michael Winery. Thank you for giving your insights. You have probably one of the most challenging locations and wineries in the valleys between Sonoma and Napa valleys. And it's exciting to get information about Ember and what your capabilities are, because you really are making a difference in the wine industry, as well as for homeowners. But I know you're leaning in very heavily on the wine industry in partnership with us. And certainly, I hope everybody got some great insights too on what's going on in insurance, and that there are ways to beat the system a bit. It depends, and it does matter who you partner with and the process by which they go about fighting the fight for you. If your story, Stuart touched on that, have somebody that's very much embedded, knowing your story and advocating for you, and really just not accepting the status quo of what the industry averages are for rate increases, because these things are just going to continue to rise until a bunch of us push back and say, no, there is really a story here to be told, and make sure that you have the story that needs to be told. Lean in on that wildfire defense and create some budgeting around that, because I think that is going to be the key to making sure that not only does your winery survive in a wildfire situation, but that you can get more tenable insurance on cost and capacity for your facility. So with that, I want to thank everybody. Here are our speakers today. Really, thank you very much. This is the contact information, and you're going to be able to get further contact information and maybe a better format through Kim and the Wine Industry Network. And we want to thank the Wine Industry Network and Wine Industry Advisor for promoting this really important session and very timely for wineries. So thank you for leaning in on this and getting the word out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Debra. Thank you, Stuart and Liz and Adam for all being here. And of course, Heffernan Insurance Brokers for sponsoring this session. Yes, this information is available here on the screen for reaching out for more information. It will also be below the video where active links you can click on. Hope you've enjoyed this edition of the WIN webinar. Thank you to our speakers and to our sponsor, Heffernan Insurance. Have a great day.
Thank you,
All
guys.
right.
everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.